us dive right in. Just let everybody know we are recording this session just to bring awareness to that. And we're so lucky today to have two phenomenal women experts in health and wellness with us today. So we have Sylvia and Sonia, and they're going to talk about mental health, stress management, and as well corporate wellness, and what does all this mean to us as health and safety professionals. So I'm just going to hand it right off to you, Sylvia, to kind of dive in there and start the introductions.
Thank you, Tamara, and so happy to see all of you, all these bright, shiny faces. You know, Sonia and I have been working in this field separately for over 50 years, like collectively. And now we've put our heads together to work on something that is a real passion project for us. Stress recovery, as Tamara mentioned, stress management, mental health. And we really want to focus on leaders. So I'm going to ask Sonia to dive in with a story that will kind of set the stage for where we're going in this next half hour.
All right, and there's some more people hopping on here. Okay, so I'm going to give you a professional, personal type story about 2020 because I know it's going to resonate with a lot of you. In my practice, I've been doing nutritional therapy for a long time. What I have found now is that people are not coming into my office just with their nutritional issues and their histories. And again, it's nutritional therapy, so there's always been an element of counseling in my work. People are now coming to me with 14 months of a pandemic, and the compounding impact of that kind of stress that we've all endured, and the isolation and the uncertainty and the lack of information, because there was so much information that's never enough then in that point, because it gets confusing. People are coming to me with a lot more. So I myself personally had 3 years of extreme stress and actual bullying for 3 years that no law enforcement people were able to help me with because of the situation. So I was stressed going into 2020 because of the management tools that I have and the things that I know. I was okay, but then you throw a pandemic on it. And then you throw identity theft and fraud into it. And I spend I think it was 20 hours on the phone with the CRA just to get my account back. So crazy stress going on, and it's a pandemic. And now my clients are coming to me with so much more than they had before. So I had to look at all the things that I know and what was happening in my body and my mind and my health and say, okay, so I need a boundary here because I can't do this way anymore. I'm not functioning properly. So I stopped seeing clients. Now I realize we can't all quit our jobs or anything like that after everything that's happened, but I obviously work in corporate wellness. There's other things to do. So I started figuring out, okay, what are my priorities? Where is my energy going to go? How do I make sure that my physiology and my body doesn't collapse underneath all of this stuff out here? Because Sylvia and I were just having a chat before this happened, before we started here. And I think what's going to be really important, and why we're talking about stress and mental health and running through some of the stuff today with all of you, and we want to know how you're doing later too, and do some questions, is because self-care was a buzzword before this started happening, right? Like take a bath, chocolate cake, red wine. And we all know that was just the beginnings. That isn't actually self-care, but it's a place to start. What Sylvia and I know, and she's going to talk about this shortly when she talks about your brain on stress, is that if you don't understand the physiological consequences in your health, in your body, and your mental health of not taking care of yourself, of not having boundaries, it's really hard to justify them to yourself, because this is the hardest person to justify that to, never mind everyone else. And when leaders in a company all get on the same page about what that is, that can really change the dynamics of how things operate. And then of course, changes the impact on your people. Has anyone here kind of had something like that this last year, where you just had that day where you're like, wow, I'm so not okay. And I'm always okay, except I'm not? Yeah, anyone? Yeah. So, and we've all come to it. Sylvia and I do this for a living. We help people with this for a living. And we've all had our things where it's just like what Sylvia is about to talk about with the brain happened. I had a trigger a little while ago. I was in an important meeting. I found something out right before the meeting. My brain stopped working. Sylvia had to cover for me in that meeting. And then I was like, wow, okay, I'm done seeing individual clients. This is done. It's over. Okay, so we're going to go over to Sylvia here. She's going to tell you what happened to me in that meeting.
I will. So before I do that, I just want to say we don't want to do a presentation today. We want an interactive session. So when Sonia asked that question, some of you raised your hands. That floats our boat. Like, we really want to connect with you and communicate with you. So we would love it if you would put questions or comments in the chat as we go. And Tamara is going to help us just understand what's going on in the chat. And then we're going to have a Q&A afterwards where we're going to really get into hopefully answering your questions. So let's just talk a little bit about what happens to your brain. And I'm going to just qualify this. What happens to us when we experience chronic stress? The reason I want to focus on chronic stress is because the human mind body mobilizes resources when the stress is infrequent. It's how we're biologically hardwired to deal with stress. We are designed to deal with a stressor, rally the resources that the mind body needs to cope, to run, to fight. And then we go back into balance or homeostasis. That's a big fancy science word, until the next stress. But when we are dealing with chronic stress, that's where the danger really exists. Sonia is going to talk a little bit more about what happens in your body, but I want to tell you about the most frightening correlation between the way your brain works and how safe you are, not just at work, but how safe you are in making decisions and judgments, even about your own well-being. And so here's what happens physiologically. When you are in the stress response, we call that the sympathetic nervous system. Big fancy name for the stress response. Now, in that condition or state, and please be aware that sometimes you have lost awareness that you are in the stress response because it's become your normal, right? How many of you go on holidays and 3 days into holidays, you go, what are my shoulders doing down here? Has gravity taken them too? Usually they're up here. So sometimes you don't know how stressed you are until you're not stressed anymore. So let's just suffice it to say all of us are living in a state of chronic stress that we may have lost awareness of. But here's what happens to you. You have a brain that is designed to do two things. Number one, keep you alive, right? That's your primitive brain. But the cerebral cortex was designed to become aware and hyper aware of threats in the environment. So we can become hyper vigilant to threats in the environment, so much so that when the boss says, hey, I'd like to see you in my office at 3 o'clock, boom, we're in the stress response. Now, what happens to your brain when you're in that stress response is a little bit frightening. Blood flow goes to the primitive brain, the back of the brain, to keep you alive. That's designed to help you run or fight. When we experience this shift in blood flow, the front part of the brain that helps us plan, problem solve, troubleshoot, seek help or assistance and connection, get organized, goes offline. No blood flow, just enough to keep you alive, but no blood flow. So what happens to us when we show up to work and we are stressed out is we are not capable of troubleshooting, problem solving, sorting out issues, finding someone to help. In fact, we do the opposite. We make poor judgments. We become fatigued. We don't want to connect with people around us and we become avoidant. Remember, it's fight or flight. We will flight. Even emotionally, we shut down so people can't connect with us. In that state, we make bad decisions and we not only put our own safety at risk, but we put others' safety at risk. So if you were starting to think about why would I want to be interested in a wellness recovery program for my employees, hopefully you're starting to see the connection. And I'm going to throw it back to Sonia. And Sonia, actually, before we do that, no, you know what, Sonia, you talk about the physiology and then we'll come back to some questions.
Okay, I like it. So that is stress in the brain. That the impact on safety is very, very clear. So here is the second compounding layer of that. When it is prolonged, like let's say, I don't know, 14 months or so of a pandemic, and it isn't just work, it isn't just home, it's everything, and your kids and your family and everyone, the dog's probably feeling the stress. When it's prolonged that long, the body shifts out of the kind of adrenaline state that we first move into the cortisol state. And the cortisol is used to keep us going when there's chronic long-term stress. So here's a few things about cortisol. It became a bit of a villain in the 80s when we realized a lot of cortisol made us gain weight in certain unwanted places, but it's way beyond that. What happens when you move into that fight or flight that Sylvia was talking about? And actually it's kind of now, because our nervous systems collectively are depleted, it's fight or flight or freeze. Because if you're a safety professional, your HRs, you know, also they're like, I don't even know. Like I just didn't know what to do. And people freeze, which is also dangerous. Cortisol has a dampening effect on the immune system. Cortisol shuts down the digestive system. You need those two things to live and to fight off infections and, viruses and things like that. So the stress of the pandemic to protect us from the virus actually made our bodies more vulnerable to the virus. That's just physiology. And then when that is prolonged enough, if there were pre-existing conditions, they get worse because cortisol doesn't let up. If your immune system and digestive system aren't supporting the body, other systems break down. Blood pressure regulation, blood sugar regulation, out the window, especially if you were having problems before. So when blood pressure is too high or too low, or blood sugar is too high or too low, you've got extra brain fog, a brain fog storm over the disconnect in the brain, and it gets even more dangerous. So that's why, like all the work that Sylvia and I do, and why we're doing stuff for leaders kind of first, and going into the wellness recovery programming work that we do, is because what's about to happen in the next 2 years, as far as the decline in collective health and the increase in accidents and stress leave, would have happened over the next 10 years. After 14 months of cortisol and depletion and eating too much cheesecake and drinking too much wine and not moving and all those things, that's probably going to speed up to about the next 2 years. That's me as a nutritional therapist knowing how the breakdown in the body goes. So we're concerned about these things. And we know for sure that you guys are starting to see this. You've seen it in yourself, your family, and you're seeing it in your people. And in the back of your minds, you're like, OMG, like, what are we even going to do? Because you see it coming. And it's kind of scary to talk about this stuff, but there are ways to actually intervene on these things. So, yeah. Sylvia.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what we want you to know is that all of the leading health professionals across the world have been saying the same thing that Sonia and I started saying at the beginning of the pandemic last year, which was, OMG, wait till 12 to 18 months after this pandemic sort of settles out. We are going to see unprecedented numbers of suicide, depression, anxiety, PTSD. And Sonia and I are terrified. And we want to get a prevention plan in place right now so that we can help people so that that doesn't happen. And one of the things we really want to leave you with today as a tip, it's our corporate wellness tip, probably number one that went out last week on social media. And that is, stop asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Everything that you're experiencing is normal under these circumstances. Stop looking at your employees, your children, your family, your spouses, and saying, what's wrong with you guys? We are all struggling right now, and asking, what's happened to me? What's happened to you guys? is such a loving and gentle way of offering some hope to yourself and some hope to them. If something happened to someone, we can help them. If something's wrong with someone, that's tough. That's a much different conversation, and it's more hopeless. But asking with empathy, what happened to them, gives us just a little bit of grace to not overreact when an employee comes in and has a really big reaction to something that's really small, because we're all kind of on our last nerve right now. And so what we've done is we have put together, Sonia and I have decided, as she mentioned, to start with leaders. We've put together this leadership series. Sonia's going to go into a little more detail. We'd love your questions. We'd love your comments and feedback all through this. And we'd love for you to ask us questions about what's going on in your workplace that we might be able to help you with. So Sonia, do you want to talk about the leadership series coming up?
I can, and I'm going to frame it not really so, I mean, it's pretty obvious, I think, what it's about. We are going to give leaders the tips, the tools, and the strategies for themselves and their families, which then automatically turns into strategies on how you deal with your people and insights into how those things can help. We have it split up into 3 half days, which Tamara, do you want to just so that we don't have to go into the details of it, because I want people to be able to ask questions and chat, do you want to just throw the PDF or the link up there?
Yep.
So if you like what you're hearing here, you guys can take a look at it. We've got it split up into 3 kind of key topics where we really want to focus on you and understanding when you understand the impact of the last 14 months and probably the last 14 years, because we're going to help you with the last 14 or 40 years too. When you understand that in yourself and you integrate some of the tools and the understandings that we will give to you for yourself, it is very easy to translate that into a conversation with an employee, to looking at a department and to figuring out, and of course, to figuring out as a leadership team how to go about it. Because when you guys are on the same page about what Sylvia and I have just talked about, it changes the conversation about what you're going to do. And I mean, Sylvia and I can come in and blow your minds with what your ROI is probably going to be on anything like that. Because if we can intervene on this, it's going to make a really massive difference. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to break in here because we did have a question by Gabe. Gabe,
Okay.
did you want to come on mic and ask?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a small organization, a small team of, there's a dozen of us here. And in the last 18 months, I've seen such a broad range of reactions to stress. Obviously, all of us have been under a lot of stress with the pandemic and with dealing with our families and et cetera, et cetera. But I have everything from someone that will say, hey, I need to take a mental health day and just pull back for a little bit, which I'm totally okay with. And then others where it's just nose to the grindstone and they're just cranking away. And you could just see this person just crumbling in how they respond to other people. And to me, it's damaging, not just to them, but even in how they're dealing with our customers or with our vendors,
Yes.
because they're just making those poor decisions and yet will not even address the situation at hand. So I guess my question is, what are some of the when you've got such a broad range of reactions from people, some who are very, very aware of mental health and taking care of themselves, and others who, for some reason or another, will even deny that it's even an issue. Where do you begin?
That's such a great question. Do you mind if I hop on, Sonia?
Yeah, go. And then I'll add in later if I.
Yeah. So, so much of what needs to happen is awareness, right? So some of it is going to be educating the employees as a group about what's going on. The person that's nose to the grindstone is escaping. That's their escape, right? That's how they don't feel what they're feeling. And it is totally appropriate when you look at legislation, probably the same in the US as it is in Canada. You cannot address people's mental health directly, but you can address performance. I've noticed that you are doing this when customers, or I've, been getting some customer feedback, blah, blah, blah. So you can address performance and then open the conversation to, can we talk about what happened? Can we talk about what's going on for you? That's not your usual way of performing your job. The other thing you can do, and working with a lot of manufacturing companies on injury prevention strategies, I will actually encourage them to set limits on what those workaholic employees are doing. Like, you cannot, you can make it so that they cannot access their work email between certain hours. You can tell them you do not have access to the building at 4 o'clock in the morning anymore. You are not allowed in. I have workers who are doing that, showing up at 4 in the morning, claiming that they can't get their work done during their day. And management has just been like, oh, well, we can't stop them. I'm like, yeah, you can. And you need to. You need to set the boundaries for people who can't set the boundaries for themselves. Why? Because their stress leave is going to cost you money. In Canada, we're looking at over $50 billion a year in stress leaves, and that's from like 2012. That's an old statistic. What's it going to be a year from now? The only reason people aren't off on stress leave right now is because they can't afford to earn 60% of their income right now. But it's going to happen. Yeah. And worse, the walking wounded will show up to work with their inability to do their job, and you can't say to them, you're out, because there's legislation to protect people, and rightly so. So it's a very sticky wicket. So my encouragement to you would be to, at minimum, start with education, then look at checks and controls that you can put in place for the employees that are overdoing. Look at what kind of performance conversations you can have with them, where you can talk about things that you are legally capable of talking about without risking harassment. Does that help, Gabe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even just having more of those conversations and having more open conversations about stress and dealing with it, even from a management level, I think it sets the tone a lot in the organization. Even to be able to, come into the workplace every day and just be able to acknowledge that, things are tough, or, that there are stresses everywhere or at home. And, I, as a leader, I'm not immune to it. And I think it sets the tone that we can have these kinds of conversations and be open about them. So yeah, definitely good input. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to add one more thing to that, and then we have, I think, some more questions here. So if mental health is, if there's, like Sylvia was saying, there's laws about how you can approach these things. One of the things that Sylvia and I do in the work that we do and in this workshop series is we deliberately change the language. We take the word mental health off the table. We talk about stress. We talk about, like we just did here, we talk about this, like what we just explained about stress in the head, stress in the body. We sneak the word trauma in, because if your leadership team is trauma informed, because if you didn't know all of this, we've just partially trauma informed you. We won't get into the trauma side of it. If you can talk about stress, if you can talk about the triggers of stress, if you can talk about the physiological impact in the body of stress and how it affects your brain, you are talking about mental health, but you are not triggering people. And if your leadership team has the same language for those things, and if your whole team, because there's probably all kinds of different sizes of companies here, if everyone starts to understand what stress does in the brain and in the body, and the diseases that it creates and how and why, which we just did in 10 minutes for you, a bigger explanation is better. That changes the way people talk at their desks about it. It changes how they approach the conversation with you about stress leave. It changes how they approach things with their parents, with their kids, because that's really, what this series is based on. It's about helping the individual that shows up to help themselves, help everything else as well automatically. Because if you're doing it for yourself, It translates into how you deal with everyone. And then all of a sudden people notice that you're handling things differently. Into the family, into the workplace, because Sylvia and I will tell you, this illusion that we had in the 80s, that professional and personal lives were separate, I really hope that bubble has burst, because your employees, dogs, kids, ailing parents, broken car, mortgage, whatever, comes to work with them every day. And it's not fair that it's up to companies and business owners to help people manage their lives. But that's where we're at because of the world that we've created in the society that we lived in. So
I'm just going to hop in here. We do have a question by Sarah. Sarah, did you feel comfortable coming on mic and asking, or you want me to read? Okay, so I'll read. What role does EAP play as a resource is the question.
Should I say that, Sylvia?
Go for it.
Okay, EAPs came up for good reasons and with good intent. I think we all know, because we've had this conversation, Sylvia and I, 100 times, the usage is really low. And one of the reasons that is because collectively we don't understand the stuff that Sylvia and I just explained to you. We go when it's too late. There's so much physiological damage at that point. If you go for something urgent, something acute, and get some counseling, a counseling situation and that kind of stuff cannot heal the root cause of the damage in the body that has left that mind and that mental health deserted. Does that make sense? So they're good. I do find that structurally they're really lacking. I think there should be a wellness EAP integration in as far as a strategy goes. But if you change the conversation around mental health and change it to stress and the stuff I just talked about, people will likely see the EAP program differently. Mm-hmm. And then they might use it more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. Yeah. So my experience with EAP, both as a user and as, I'm free to admit that I have used counselors, although I think I have my poop all together all the time. I have used counseling over the years for situations of extreme stress. This is my advice to people. EAP is paid for by your company and it is free to you as a user. Go for it, make use of it, but do not settle for someone that doesn't get you or that you don't connect with, because research shows it's not just, in fact, it's less about what someone says to you as a counselor and far more about the trust and validation that you get in the relationship. The quality of the therapeutic relationship is 100% critical. So you can get the best advice from a counselor that you don't really like, don't really connect with. It matters not. You're not going to do it. You can be heard and validated and maybe not given a ton of advice by somebody that you feel has your back in every way, that you just connect with. And that alone, that therapeutic relationship alone can be very, very powerful. As a professional coach, when I see clients, my first statement to the client is let's have a chat and let's see if you think I fit with you, because it doesn't matter what my expertise is. If we don't fit from your perspective, I can't help you. So when, companies are paying for EAP, it's available, it's free. Don't settle for a counselor. Ask for another one until you find someone that you gel with. And if you don't gel with them, find someone else. Friends will tell you what you want to hear. The counselor will tell you the truth. This is my view on counseling. Counselors are above the forest. You're in the forest. You have no compass. The canopy of the trees is so thick, you can't see the sun. You have no idea which direction is north, south, east, west, or how to get out sometimes. And the counselor can say 20 paces to the left and walk straight. You'll be out in 5 minutes. That's the benefit of counseling or coaching. So if you're going to go with EAP because your company is offering it, absolutely go for it, but don't settle. And then please consider the fact that if that person doesn't understand some of what Sonia and I have shared with you, you will only get so far. Not that Sonia and I have all the magic, but you need to get underneath. As Sonia said, you need to get underneath what's really going on in your life, which often relates to things in your past, and it's very complicated. But that's my take on EAP. It's a resource that companies spend a lot of money on, and it is so underutilized, and that's really awful.
Yeah.
It's such a waste.
Since we're, talking corporate wellness today, on that, there's a question here from Malcolm that I want to get to. A great strategy really right now, if you're not in a place where you can take on a wellness program or a wellness strategy or whatever it is, and this is maybe going to tie into Malcolm's question, but if you want to rephrase it after I answer this for more, then please do that. A really great strategy right now, and what I find as a wellness strategist person is missing from most wellness strategies, or most companies don't even have a strategy, they have a program, which is different, is no one comes in and teaches the employees how to best use their benefits and what some of those things even are. One of the best things you could do right now is have someone like us or someone actually come in and explain what an osteopath does, what acupuncture is, what the counselors are for, and have a mini stress presentation like we just did now to change that conversation. Because if your people don't start using different words, they aren't going to get to the conversations that are get them to the place where they can advocate for themselves and get the help that they need. Because people are having a hard time, for me, even if I get triggered showing up to a meeting right now, like there's a lot of stuff going on. So figure out something for a basic stress education and something for self-advocacy and understanding what's really available to them. Because my clients come into the office and I'm like, I actually have them bring their benefit plan to me, and we strategize their recovery according largely to use the best case scenario of what they have available to them. And I teach them how to use their benefits efficiently. Don't just up the massage therapy because they're just going for relief. They are not solving any problems. Get a strategy in place. I clearly feel strongly about this.
Can I get a hallelujah?
So Malcolm, did that answer your question, or do you want anything else there?
I think that's a pretty fair reply. And I should reach out to our director of HR and share this information with them. Because when we do onboard employees, I think a lot of time with the programs that you're discussing, it's just in the handbook. We don't really explore it, with the employee. We do explore safety and the responsibilities and policies and procedures, but the soft programs are kind of lacking right now. And I think that's a good idea to do that. And I appreciate you putting that out there.
Yeah, well, and just so that you all know, like Sylvia and I know that we're kind of a little bit ahead of the mainstream times and understanding. We are more than happy to hop on discovery calls with you and your team or your managers and have a chat and explain some of this to them. Because so many of us don't know. People have their jobs, they're overwhelmed. Now I have to think of another thing. Like that's the whole point of this series, is not to put anything more on the plates of leadership, but to teach you how to take stuff off your plates. Mm-hmm. So, we'll do that. You can reach out to us through whatever means is all in the chat and our website and stuff like that. We will explain this. We'll take the time and do a discovery call with you and your team to explain this and get everyone on the same page, because that's important for buy-in.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add one thing, Malcolm, when your leaders understand all of this stuff, they actually feel just a little bit of relief, because they realize that they are not responsible for looking after everyone's mental health. Because what it sounds like for some people, this might be like, oh God, now I have to worry about what's going on in my employee's home. No, when we have good, solid strategies in place, like the stuff that Sonia and I want to teach you, it will actually take so much work so much fear, so much responsibility off the shoulders of leaders so that they can more effectively focus on what their job is, which is to lead the people. And we can make it so that it's easy. Instead of, it's not another procedure, not another policy, not another protocol to learn. It's actually just a way of communicating and facilitating, and looking at things that will give you some really concrete, solid tools. And we know that people are overwhelmed right now. We know that leaders are struggling themselves. So how do you lead? As Sonia started with that story, how do you lead when you are up to here already? You know, so we understand that perspective, and we really want to help people kind of unload the burden of responsibility, learn to take care of themselves. And then through osmosis, it's going to filter out through your culture and people, because it's a very different way of looking at things. We focus on bringing the health into health and safety. We're really good at machine guarding. We're really good at slip, trips, and falls, but where we're lacking is in these softer skills of creating, and like Gabe said, communicating about mental health or about stress. We lack that focus on health and well-being, which traditionally was not part of safety, but it really needs to be part of safety now.
And it'd be interesting to see in the chat how many people are getting more focused on health as we go along. Is this something that more people are doing? You know, just say yes or no in the chat. And do you have any questions for Sonia and Sylvia about that? Like how, any questions about how maybe to roll that out to the team, because it is different than doing safety?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a comment from Gabe. Gabe, did you want to come on mic and share?
Yeah, I think definitely the last year, I've had so many more discussions on physical and mental health and safety with my team, and it's been coming up so much more. And initially, it was, and I'm gonna draw the generational line there, but it seems like it was a lot of my younger staff that seemed to be on board with discussing it from the start. But now my more seasoned staff is starting to have those discussions now too. They're a lot more
Awesome.
open to it. Even even throwing on around the word therapy has been. I've heard that word so much more in my organization over the last year than I have before,
Fabulous.
and from everybody.
Yeah.
Even people that are just kind of curious about it. So I think it's been there is a change that's happening, and I think because it's hitting home too. People are
Yes.
seeing it with their own kids, with their parents, everybody across the board, and I think it's probably a long overdue discussion.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you, I work in a lot of manufacturing, production, healthcare organizations as an occupational therapist. So that's my professional designation beyond the fact that I'm a professional speaker. And so I provide injury prevention services, which initially focused on reducing repetitive strain injury risk. But you know, over the last 2 years, it actually started before 2020, about 50% of the issues that people are coming to me with in manufacturing right now, about 50% are emotional issues. And literally, these people are just struggling to stay at work. I have people who are on, you know, performance programs because there's outbursts. I just had a guy yesterday who just about lost his job 2 months ago. He had an angry outburst. It was terrible. He ended up in a disciplinary meeting. He was threatened with losing his job. I saw him that day. He would not speak to me, interestingly enough. He kept running from one room to the next. I finally caught him and I said, I am feeling that you are not okay today. Can you tell me? Do you want to talk? Anyways, that led to a whole bunch of things that he needed to do that I supported him with and helped him with. And yesterday I saw him and he texted me last night even saying, my whole life has changed in 2 months. I feel like a different person. Thank you. I'm not saying that because I'm so great. I'm saying that because even as a contractor, people's mental health is really the primary focus. So much of what I do is helping people with their mental health now, because that's the world we live in right now.
Yeah. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw something at you guys. We'll pretend it's my mental health keynote. There's a quote that I use and what my nutritional therapy practice is based in. When you get on the same page, if you want to fast track some of this for your company, you really have to get on the same page of what stress is, what it does to the mind and the body. And you have to have a new language. When you have a new language, your culture starts to shift. If you don't have a culture shift, this stuff isn't going to improve. So if we're doing, like, if you come to the leadership series, we're going to talk about this. So here is what I call the definition of a stress case. Because you all have them in your office, maybe you are one, but if you can get empathetic and curious about that person who's usually highly sensitive and can be a very valuable employee if they learn to rein it in, I'm going to give you the definition of this stress case. And this will shift the way you look at someone in your office right now, because we're talking about trauma now. The person in the grip of old distress says things that are not pertinent, does things that don't work, fails to cope with the situation at hand, and endures terrible feelings that have nothing to do with the present. That's Harvey Jackins. And then I would add in, and whose body is damaged every time that old stress is triggered. It's the same cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones that happened at whatever the trauma was, and why they endure terrible feelings that have nothing to do with the present. That is where so much of this is coming from. And then you add a pandemic and a sick dog and a teen with anxiety because they can't go to school. That's why this stuff has to be the foundation of any strategy that you guys go into. Whoever you use it for, whether you come see us or you've got someone, you have to change the language to change the culture. Because the new language takes the triggers right out. They don't have triggers on those words. I want another hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And you know, it's interesting because Sylvia, we did a workshop a while ago, and during that we did some research, and
Yes.
we asked 105 people their opinion about what was impacting them. And you know, mental stress, relationships, quality of life, emotional stress, isolation, financial stress. These were all the things that were coming. Do you remember that?
Yes, I sure do. And thank God those people were so open and honest with us. But it's scary when you look at the long list of things that people are dealing with right now, and so compounded by what we're living with, this pandemic. You know, like it or not, some people, it's interesting because, you know, I'm presenting at some conferences in the fall where they've specifically said, please avoid talking about the pandemic, right? Because we're pandemic fatigued. I'm like, okay, but the truth is that it is still the elephant in the room if we don't talk about it. But people are fatigued from talking about it, and yet we still need to deal with it.
Now, Malcolm, you sent me a direct comment. Did you want to come on mic and share that? Well, he was shared with me that what you're saying really ties into our positive leadership topics.
Excellent.
Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I had to let the dog out.
That's okay. That's a priority.
Yeah, one of the topics that Gabe and Tamara and I are involved with is positive leadership, and get how we present ourselves to the employees and stuff. And when you're negative, it has an impact on their behaviors and that. So what you mentioned, Sonia, really ties well into that, because we do want to improve the work center where people feel it's a positive atmosphere and not just being part of the grind. And I think mental health is really important to that. My early background before I got into health and safety, I was an occupational health provider. We did physicals and talked to employees about the stressors and stuff, from the work environment, not so much mental. but some of the things they did, at the work center, carried on to home, such as what their exposures were to chemicals and stuff. They took their clothes home, their wives washed it, they hugged their children, and that had an impact on their family.
Yes.
Stressors at work also do the same thing. They take the stress from work, they go home, and it impacts the family.
Yeah.
So, so the wife and children, from a nutritionist value, the stress can, have that impact, where they gain weight. From the other side is, if they don't have an outlet to express themselves or release that, it can also impact the value that they have at home. And then they bring that back to work.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's very negative. But it's a very excellent topic. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know what, since, you're all leaders and you got companies and things are about money too, obviously, I've been doing this for a while. But if you talk to your leadership team and if you all have this language and you understand these things, and then if someone comes in and says, okay, so the kids are all stressed out, this generation is going on anti-anxiety meds awfully early, that's going to explode because of the isolation from their friends, the fear, their prefrontal cortexes that are disconnected, weren't even fully formed before they got disconnected by all of this stress. That is a massive cost because their kids are on your benefit plan. And the parents are having sleepless nights because of the kids and going to medical appointments. The cost is crazy. The good position that Sylvia and I are in right now is like, we are not a hard sell. If we get an hour of your team's time, it's not a hard sell to bring some wellness in because we can give you the numbers, right? So, and that has to matter because when a company is not doing well, if things are getting too expensive or you have to cut back on benefits and stuff like that, if you get to that point, it's just bad for everyone. And like I've always said, it isn't fair that it's now companies that are teaching us how to survive, but it is the world that we're in right now. The healthcare system's overwhelmed. It's kind of up to companies and leaders now, which sucks, but this is the world we've created. And there are ways to intervene to not crash and burn 2 to 3 years from now.
And one of the things that Sarah put into the chat is that she thinks that you should involve employees and families in your wellness program strategy.
Yes.
We actually have room for that. Yep.
Yeah, we have in the year long that Sylvia and I have. It's because in a lot of workplaces, especially manufacturing, there's more men. They have wives at home that are actually in charge of the family's wellness, even if they are working. It's just, it's a more feminine kind of thing to do. So it's typically the person who's working less or has a less stressful job, they're doing it. If you don't have a strategy that includes the kids and the spouses, what are you doing? It's like I always tell leaders when we do these meetings, if you don't have a way to help your employee help little Johnny with his IBS and little Susie with her anxiety, they aren't going to help themselves first.
No.
Right.
You have to target the caretaker in the family that's in charge of those things, because it's usually more one than the other, whether it's the dad or the mom or the mom or the mom. There's usually one that's more in charge of those things. You have to be able to access them through the program, even if they don't work for you. So Sarah, totally on the same page. We could probably talk about that for an hour.
Well, we don't have an hour left. We do have 10 minutes. So I wanted to remind people that I did put the link to your upcoming workshop that's going to be in July the 12th, 13th, and 15th into the chat so people can check it out. And I just wanted to see if anybody had any other questions that they might have before we start rounding things up. Or Sylvia, Sonia, do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share?
I do have 2 quick comments, just springboarding off what Malcolm was saying, and that is, so the first thing I want to say is that when you look at research on the North American workforce, people report that work tied with finances are their #1 stressors. So when we look at what's the business case for teaching people in our organization, what's the business case for bringing in stress management, stress recovery, wellness programming, there's a really big business case, because it makes sense to intervene at the workplace, because it is considered to be what North Americans report as their #1 stressor. The second thing I just wanted to mention, Malcolm, is here's a little strategy for your positive leadership group. And you might already know this, but research says that for every, let me back up. Research shows us that people can smell the sandwich that, you know, they used to tell us, you say one really positive thing to an employee, then you deliver the constructive criticism, and then you end with a positive. People can smell that bologna sandwich a mile away. But what research shows is that for every bit of constructive criticism that a leader delivers, regardless of how it's delivered, you can say it in the nicest possible way. It takes 3 strokes or 3 positive comments to negate the sting of that constructive criticism, no matter how beautifully you put it. You can disguise it and pretty it up with, you know, rosebuds and whatever else, they know. So the next 3, and you can literally have a little checklist. Okay, I've seen Gabe on Monday. I told him he was doing a really good job. Last week, Thursday, I told him some constructive criticism. Monday, I said something good. The following week, Thursday, there's another check mark. I told Gabe that I really appreciated him and that he was, you know, #1 on that machine. And then you've got one more positive bit of feedback to give him before he's forgotten finally that he felt a little bit of a sting when you gave him the constructive criticism. So there's a little practical tip for those leaders that have to deliver some hard news to people. Make sure you follow up with 3 positive compliments or comments.
Yeah, are there
and they can't smell that.
bologna sandwich? It's so funny. I've got one more thing to add, but does anyone else have anything like specific about what you're seeing in the company and you're puzzled about? Because we're here, you got experts. We're not charging you lots an hour right now. Anything there? Because I've got one more thing to add. I just don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, so I'm just going to say one more thing, I guess maybe to round this out a little bit, and then Sylvia, if you've got something else. Like I said before when we were chatting, if your curiosity is piqued and you want to know a little bit more, please know that you are very welcome to book a discovery call with Sylvia and I. You're not going to get a hard sell. You know, we understand that we are educating and kind of we're a little bit pioneer-ish. We are happy to talk with you and your team for a period of time and see if we can help you get on the same page. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to act on it right away, but it will start something. If you need a place to start, get on a discovery call with us. And then the other thing that just felt on this leadership series that we're going to be doing in July, 2 things about it. We did it during a week in summer as like a little leadership camp on purpose because things have been hard. It's summer, it's in the afternoon. You can use it as an excuse to just do that and then be done work for the day and feel good. So that's why we did this in summer, because it's been a crazy year and people need help now. And the other thing that we will kind of help you navigate, because I'm all about asking the hard questions. And Sylvia always has my back on them, which is great. And it's this thing about finding another language. We're also going to tackle the difficult discussions around diversity and inclusion and equality and all of these kinds of things, because these words now have triggers attached to them in our minds. When you find a different language, which is what we will help you with, that conversation can change too. So we just want to let you know that we really have taken the best of our 50 years and put it into this thing, because it starts with leaders. Moving into conscious leadership is the way to actually change the whole freaking world.
Yeah. Hallelujah.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Tamara, what about you? Did you have any questions, comments, or final thoughts? Why don't you wrap up?
Well, one of the questions I have for you is, for both of you, is do you have any ideas about what people might be able to do when they leave today to help kind of open up the discussions about talking about creating health programs in the workplace?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is really important is to have open discussions, as Gabe mentioned, about what do people feel they need. And also for everyone in the company to start learning the question, what's happened to me, what's happened to you, instead of what's wrong with Joe. Because that, like, gossip in the workplace is a really good way to kill morale. And what do people gossip about? What they think is wrong with everyone else. So if we change that language and get people to open up to this idea of, hey, we are all struggling. Let's stop making judgments about each other, and with curiosity, say what's happened, and maybe we can help each other a little bit more, and have these open conversations. Like start today, start tomorrow, saying what's going on for you guys. Let's have, instead of a morning huddle where we're just talking about safety, let's see if we can get people to talk about, what do you need help with? What's stressful? When I go into companies, the first thing I do is I talk to all of the employees about a specific topic that I'm doing a presentation on. I'll do my presentation, I will poll the employees, and then I take that information back to the leadership team. And then we have a strategic planning session based on what the employees have said. You, as leaders, we think we know what the employees need, but until you hear it from them, you don't really know, you're guessing.
Yeah.
What we know is everyone needs help, but what we don't know is exactly what they need help with. And you can start that conversation today.
Yeah.
And
oh, sorry, Tyson, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
and then go ahead. And then Sarah had a question.
Yeah, so to Sarah's question is what Sylvia was just talking about here. What strategies can you use to gather information regarding how people are feeling? Surveys. So yes, you can do a survey. What I know, Sylvia and I haven't actually talked about this, but I've done this. You are best for something like that, having someone on the outside help you create the survey and get the answers and give them to you, because your employees will answer differently.
Yeah.
That isn't a massive expense. We can sit down and help you put together a survey and give you an assessment on it. That's actually part of the analysis and strategy session that we do for leaders. We ask the questions because we're going to ask them differently. Our questions are going to be trauma informed and stress informed and all that kind of stuff, and then interpret that for you. And it doesn't have to be a complicated situation, but that's a really great way to actually start, because if you ask those questions with the new language in a way that they will understand and strategically, you will get different answers because you aren't triggering with the typical questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. I'm just going to give you one super quick story. Huge North American based company that I worked with. I did a presentation, went in, talked to the employees, brought back these themes to the leadership team. And one of the things that they were blown away by, there was several themes, but one theme that came up repeatedly was the employees wanted management presence on the floor, not with an issue, not with an agenda. And the whole team was up in arms, like, how are we going to do that? I don't have time for that. This conversation went around the table for about 5 minutes. And then the CEO looked at me and he said, "You're very quiet. You have an idea, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Okay, what's your idea?" I said, "There's 6 of you managers. Each of you goes onto the floor 1 hour a week. So every 6 weeks, it's you. And then every 6 weeks, it's you. And every 6 weeks, it's you. But there's an hour of management presence every single week. You don't go down with a clipboard. You don't go down with an agenda. You go down with an open heart to talk to people and to ask them how they are. They want to show you the pictures of their grandchildren on their phone. This is what they want. They want you to ask them how their weekend was. And then the CEO says, "Well, what if they have concerns? What? I'll forget them." Yeah, I said, "You ask them to write them down. Say, I'd really appreciate it if you would write that down for me. And I'm going to take that note and please put your name on it. And I promise you, I will look at them." So you go down empty-handed, open-hearted, and they've been doing that for a year now. And I'm in touch with the plant manager every 3 weeks. They're doing fantastic. Everything has changed in that culture and they've adopted it and they've stuck to it. Simple. But no one would say that. But they'll say it to me because I'm a stranger to them.
So that's exactly the point. You've got someone else coming in. And I'm going to answer a question that some of you might have later. It's just like, you've done wellness things and seminars and all this kind of stuff. The reason Sylvia and I are different and we ask different questions and we have this approach is because we have a lot of personal one-on-one strategy coaching. Your company is one organism made up of all the different little parts. You are one family. When I look at a company and all the moving parts and the departments and the dysfunctions, I see a body. You know, this department is like the kidneys. This department is, you know, like the brain, and they think they're in charge, but this department's actually the gut, and they're the ones that are actually in charge. And that's where strategies and approach and things can really get down to some of the root causes and do what Sylvia did there, this one thing. And so we will ask the questions differently. When we talk to your people, they give us a different answer than they would get you. And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
No.
Yeah.
So yeah. So, you know, yeah, if anyone has any more questions, you can get in touch with us and do a call. And Tamara has put the link for the workshop series. We're really excited about it. Like, we can't wait to just help whoever shows up with these things, because that is going to help who knows how many more people when it's done.
And I just wanted to kind of build on what the two of you were just saying also about strategy, is when you're doing a survey out to a large population, on the employee side, they're always wondering when I'm filling this out, what is the value for me as an employee? And so, like, one of the workshops we did with a very large company is we did a survey of just 4 simple questions, not a big long survey that takes people 15, 20 minutes, just 4 questions. And then when they shared back their answers, one of them was just to give us one word. I'm just going to do a screen share so people can see it.
Are you going to do the word cloud, Tamara?
Yeah.
That was really brilliant.
Yeah. So this word cloud here is very interesting because we did this to kind of get our heads around what people were thinking. But what happened was we used it in our workshop, in our discussion back to the audience, and then they started talking about it for weeks and weeks after, because they saw their own words coming back at them. And so, and it's something very simple. You know, we did it through email. You can do it by department either also, you know, so they can see their own. But the team said that it helped them kind of understand that others were going through the same thing. And I think in a time right now, that's what we really want to know, is that we're not going through this alone, that it is a shared experience.
True. Well said. That was a really fun exercise. That went really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did people have any other questions before we tie this up today? No? Sylvia or Sonia, did you have any last thoughts?
I just want to say thank you. Sonia and I would like to thank you, Tamara, for organizing this, for putting so much work into giving us the opportunity, for partnering with us. You know, it's great to partner with a company like Safeopedia. They're a great company, but we appreciate the expert facilitation and organization that you provide, Tamara. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone for coming.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I did put the link again into the chat. So if people want to check it out, you can do that. As well, I have put the link for the PDF. So if people want to check that out, they can look at that also. I'll just put that in again, just in case some people missed it. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you in July.
Yes.